91 years ago, two icons of popular culture emerged. One was a cryptid, a supposed creature that science does not recognize. The other was a movie that proved very popular at the time and has been highly influential to future filmmakers. At first glance, these two items would seem to be very far removed. However, on closer examination, one would find that the cryptid could not exist today without the movie. The name of the cryptid in question is the Loch Ness Monster. The movie was King Kong. The first true sighting of the Loch Ness Monster is somewhat debatable. Prior to 1933, the earliest known report that has been claimed to be as such occurred in approximately the 6th century. It took place not at the Loch Ness Lake in Scotland, but instead at the connected River Ness. In the story, Irish monk St. Columba banished the creature from the river. Interestingly, period descriptions of this creature bear little resemblance to the modern perception of the monster. Aside from this, there are two supposed sightings from the 1800s, but these were few and far between. The sighting that ignited popular interest in the creature occurred on July 22, 1933. George Spicer and his wife were driving from a movie late at night. When motoring down a road by the loch, they saw a giant creature walk across the road with a dead animal in its mouth. In Spicer's words,
"It was the nearest approach to a dragon or prehistoric animal that I have ever seen in my life."
He elaborated further by saying,
"It was fairly big, with a high back, but if there were any feet, they must have been of the web kind, and as for a tail, I cannot say, as it moved so rapidly, and when we got to the spot, it had probably disappeared into the loch."
Spicer's story caught on like wildfire. Soon enough, more sightings emerged. Photos were taken, stories were written, and films were made, all of which were influenced by Spicer's original report. However, the story, as well as almost everything written about the monster, loses its believability when you examine it closer, particularly when you realize that the movie that the Spicers were driving home from was King Kong. Released on March 2, 1933, King Kong quickly captured the imagination of the world, becoming the icon that it is today. But it wasn't the ape that inspired Spicer. In the film, there is a scene where a group of sailors are trying to get across a lake on a raft, when suddenly a ginormous brontosaurus arises from the murky waters, attacks the sailors, and chases them to the shoreline. If you hadn't guessed already, it is this creature that was the source of inspiration. Evidently, when the Spicers were driving down the road and saw whatever creature it was that crossed their path, their minds went back to this scene. They applied what they had seen to reality. This phenomena is known as pareidolia, which according to the Webster's Dictionary is the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern. A similar phenomenon occurred in the 1950s when UFO sightings were on the rise, which, coincidentally or not, coincided with the popularity of science fiction films of the time, such as The Day the Earth Stood Still and Earth versus the Flying Saucers. The Loch Ness Monster's connection to King Kong doesn't end with the Spicer sighting. A year later, in 1934, the Daily Mail published this picture of the monster. The photo, known as the surgeon's photograph, has a controversial history. It was originally taken by big game hunter Marmaduke Wetherell. His motivation was to get revenge on the Daily Mail newspaper for discrediting his supposed Loch Ness Monster footprints, which turned out to be hippopotamus tracks. He had his friend, London gynecologist Robert Wilson, submit the photo to the Daily Mail. Decades later, the photo was proven to be a hoax. Upon looking at the photo today, one can see a resemblance between the subject in the photo and this shot of the brontosaurus in King Kong. In 2019, A project led by the New Zealand-based University of Otago used DNA analysis methods to catalog all animals and fish species living near and in Loch Ness. The study, while finding DNA of hundreds of different species of animals and millions of samples, could not find any evidence of a giant monster. They did find eel DNA in the loch. However, later studies have doubted the possibility of a giant eel in the lake. In conclusion, the Loch Ness Monster probably never existed in the first place. But what this story does show is how popular culture can influence the real world. Even a movie about a giant ape can turn a lake in Scotland into a tourist destination.